for province.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to take this opportunity today to speak about this legislation. I'd like to start off by recognizing the sponsors of the bill, the Honourable Senator Tulijan from the other House, and of course our member here from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, and just for the leadership that they've shown on this important issue. I want to thank them, and it's encouraging to see somebody bring forward a bill that can be supported across all party lines and across both houses, and I'm excited to see this legislation come to fruition. I'd like to begin this morning by starting with how we view the human body and the dignity and worth that we assign to that human body. My faith teaches me that every human being is created in the image of God, that there is sanctity and a sacredness to human life, and this includes the physical body. It's why, unlike so many other ancient civilizations or religions, those who follow and who have followed Christianity, Judaism, or Islam have historically practiced burial rather than cremation. There is the belief that even after death, the human body remains important. Christianity and even some branches of Judaism teach the body will one day be resurrected and transformed. As such, the body is of value and must be treated with care and respect even after death. And if the human body is viewed as important, worthy of care and dignity, sacred even in death, how much more should it be treated as sacrosanct while the human person is alive? Even those who reject the tenets of the three Abrahamic faiths would agree that the body after death should be treated with dignity. In fact, here in Canada, we have laws that relate specifically to the handling of a human body after death. Section 182 of the Criminal Code of Canada makes it a criminal offence to improperly or indecently interfere with or offer any indignity to a dead human body. And there are similar laws around the globe. Why? Because as humans, we recognize there is a sacredness to humanity, including the physical body. And again, if treated with such dignity and reverence after death, how much more so while still alive? For those who prefer a more humanistic argument, I would point this House towards Immanuel Kant and his piece, The Groundwork of the Metaphysical Morals, in which he casts the innate dignity of every human being as a categorical imperative. If we follow Kant, we must recognize when human organs become a commodity, a monetary value is placed on that organ, and by doing so, we essentially assign a monetary value to the individual who provided it. And I think, and I'm quite confident that we all agree with Kant, that putting a price on a human being, at least in this aspect we do, on any part of a human being violates his or her intrinsic dignity. Moreover, the removal of organs by force, under coercion, or with consent violate other Kantian principles, that of bodily autonomy. We hear a lot about bodily autonomy. We hear very different perspectives on what that entails. But there is a near universal belief, at least in the Western democracies, that what happens in an individual's body should be the sole purview of that individual, or in the case of young children, that of their parents. Sadly, there are still individuals, criminal organizations, and even some governments who refuse to respect the sanctity of the body. No country officially endorses the practice of organ trafficking, but many turn a blind eye to this dehumanizing and often dangerous practice. In some cases, individuals, often those who live in poverty, sell their organs. In others, organs are obtained without the consent of the donor. An example of this would be to see what's happening in China with political prisoners, particularly people of faith. Again and again, we've raised the plight of the Uyghurs, practitioners of Falun Gong, and of course Christians. And Madam Speaker, there have been many petitions presented in this House to that effect. That the individual groups that have been persecuted by China's brutal regime, organ harvesting of these religious minorities by China is well documented. Typically, these extractions and the transplants themselves take place outside of national medical systems. So even assuming that the donor is kept alive, never a guarantee, of course, that there is a high risk associated with the extraction and implantation of these organs, and as such, these practices violate the sanctity and dignity of the human person. So I think we can all agree that human life is precious, and the body and the organs therein are worthy of the protection that this legislation seeks to provide. I am pleased that we're standing up for the value of human life. I wish we would also have the courage to show a similar concern and do what the Supreme Court of Canada instructed Parliament to do 3 decades ago, and finally enact legal protection for the preborn child in the womb. It's time that we act. I'm in favor of the bill's crackdown on foreign nationals attempting to come to Canada for those who've been involved in organ trafficking. I think that that is good. I think it's high time that we crack down on who is allowed to come to Canada and who is not. I do think, however, that we need to be careful to differentiate between those who have been involved as traffickers and those whom traffickers may have exploited. If an individual has been involved in trafficking proper, that is, if they facilitated or received monetary benefit from facilitating the illegal trafficking of organs, like those who traffic in drugs or slaves, that individual should not be admissible to Canada. And as an aside, I think it's reprehensible and hypocritical that this current government, at the same time, are supporting the legislation that brought forward Bill C-75. Even though they're supporting this legislation, they also brought forward Bill C-75, which lowered the penalties for those involved in profiting from human trafficking. It's frankly absurd, and I do hope some of the members opposite side see the disconnect. But any foreign nationals who traffic or profit from trafficking in human organs should not be admissible to Canada. That said, as I read this legislation, I do think that there should be a clear enough differentiation between traffickers and those who have willingly donated their own organs. I'm also a little bit concerned about Part 1 of Section 4.2, where it says a person who commits an act outside of Canada, that if committed in Canada would be an offence, is deemed to have committed that act in Canada. As far as it relates to this piece of legislation, I think it's good, but I understand, and I have to admit that I do struggle with that portion a little bit, and for a couple of reasons. The first is other countries aren't Canada. Every country around the globe has its own laws and legal systems, and in the same way that we would expect those who come to Canada to respect our laws, we also need to be willing to respect the laws of other countries. And I know there's good counter-arguments to that point, many of them excellent, reasonable arguments, but I do think that something needs to be said where we respect other jurisdictions. Madam Speaker, I think you've indicated my time is lapsing, and so I do want to just reiterate again that I am happy we're having this discussion. I'd like to see those handful of concerns addressed, but overall I'm pleased to be supporting this legislation. Our party is pleased to support it. I want to again thank the member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, and Senator Tulishin for their hard work on this file. I'm looking forward to supporting it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.